Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's wonderful to share some time with you this morning. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules. I'm really pleased to see that you're interested in entrepreneurship and commercialization, and looks like we have a fantastic morning planned. So over the course of my academic career, I've had the real pleasure of starting three successful biotech companies. And I've been asked to share with you today some of the things that I learned and experienced along that journey. And I'm going to focus less on sort of the technical and process aspects of what I experienced and more on the mindset that I discovered through that process to be a little bit different from the academic mindset. And before I begin, let's see. Before I begin, just some disclosures on my funding and relationships. Most relevant for this talk today is Corventum, Keros, and Telios Therapeutics, the three companies that I've co-founded. So I thought I would start out today by sharing a little bit of what got me as an academic into startup mode in the first place. And it really came from a rather unexpected place. Several years ago, a postdoc joined my lab named Charles Hong. Chaz had done his PhD studying about the most arcane fundamental thing you could possibly study, which is the developing fly embryo and how it figures out where the front is and where the back is on the embryo, so the dorsal ventral axis, about as fundamental as could be. And when he joined my lab, he was still interested in this topic, but my lab was mostly working with zebrafish at the time. And so he set out to try and discover compounds that would help us learn about how the zebrafish embryo figures out the front from the back. And the approach was very simple. We just started taking fertilized zebrafish embryos and dumping chemical compounds on them, seeing if any of them would affect this dorsal ventral axis. And we screened almost 8,000 different compounds until we found this compound shown here on the left that Chaz named dorsomorphin because of its profound ability to change the development of the zebrafish embryo. You can see that when you add this compound, they become severely dorsalized, meaning the dorsal tissues are expanded and the ventral tissues are lost. No thought at all at the moment, at that time, about any commercialization activities. And over the next few months, we were able, through work I won't explain, to discover that this compound worked by binding to and inhibiting a kinase called ALK2. And then something extraordinary happened. I was in the lab, and Chaz came up to me holding a copy of the New York Times. And in it was an article that was entitled, "Finally, with Genetic Discovery, Hope for Escape from a Prison of Bone." And it described this very rare genetic disorder called FOP, in which these kids are born normal, but over the course of the first few years of their life, their muscle starts to turn into bone. You can see these bony protuberances on this patient here. And this little girl here has become locked like a living statue in this position for the rest of her life. And you can see in this postmortem here, this patient, just whole swaths of muscle that have turned to bone. And what was interesting is that the investigators, the geneticists who were studying this disorder, had discovered that it was activating mutations in ALK2, that same kinase that our compound inhibited, that was causing this disorder. And so we recognized immediately that our compounds might be able to provide a treatment for this terrible disorder. And so with collaborators, we were able to build some mouse models of FOP. On the left, you'll see a mouse that's expressing that activated ALK2 just in one hind limb. And the muscle of that mouse has turned to bone. And let's see if I can, skipping ahead here. Here we go. So this is an FOP mouse. You can see that that leg is all ossified, locked into one position. And here's its sibling that has been treated with an ALK2 inhibitor. And you can see that it's retained the ability to use that leg. So this discovery in 2008 set me on a 12-year education where we were able to figure out what dorsomorphin was doing, show that it was useful, file patents, optimize the derivatives to make more potent and more selective versions, file more patents. We showed additional animal proof of concept. We started raising non-dilutive funds from the NIH to support the work. We expanded to other indications, and then we began pitching to investors and eventually formed Keros Therapeutics in 2015. And that led 5 years later to a really exciting day where Keros Therapeutics went public. And we were able to ring the opening bell at the NASDAQ. Now, you may remember what was happening in April of 2020. It was a pretty dark time. It was just about a month or so into the pandemic. A lot of people were dying. You can even see, this is Times Square. Look how many people, there's like nobody in Times Square. But we had this really exciting opportunity to bring this company public. This was actually the first company that went public after the pandemic started. And we entered into it with some real trepidation about what the markets, the markets were really not doing well at the time. But the IPO was very successful and launched this company into a new clinical phase that was, it's really been wonderful. So through that 12-year journey, I learned an enormous amount about commercialization and how the mindset of an entrepreneur is similar in some ways and different in others to the academic mindset. And I think the things that really carried over quite easily from academic mindset are listed here. I think the first is really the value of novelty and creativity. That's something as academics we value deeply. And that's true, I've discovered in biotech space as well. There's also great value in developing deep expertise. That's something that we value in academia deeply. And that deep expertise that you all have in your areas is highly valued in the biotech world. And then, of course, the value of scientific rigor, doing experiments well, doing really great science is valued. There are some things that were also a little bit different that surprised me. At least maybe you wouldn't be surprised by them, but I was as I journeyed through this. First is the difference between justification and deep diligence. And what do I mean by that? I think almost all of us who are doing research or publishing papers, we're used to justifying the importance of what we do. And you probably all, I just sort of made this up here, but we're used to seeing phrases like this at the beginning of a grant. Each year, there are 22,000 new AML diagnoses in the US and 75 to 80,000 people living with AML. The annual cost of AML treatment can be greater than $300,000, resulting in a cost to the US economy of $24 billion. Therefore, my research should be funded. Has anyone read paragraphs like that? I mean, this is kind of what we do. We gather statistics about how many people are suffering from a disease, and we use that to say that our grant should be funded or our paper should be accepted somewhere. What I found is that doesn't have very much value in the biotech world. And what really is necessary is a much deeper drilling down into what's going on where in the world of clinicians treating patients. You have to truly understand what the current clinical practices and concerns are, where are the unmet needs, what are the clinician sentiments about developing new drugs, what's the regulatory landscape like? Is it even possible to discover a new AML drug? What are payers thinking about all of that? Are they willing to pay for a new drug? what competing drugs are in development. It turns out there's like 400 clinical trials for in AML. What's the IP landscape like in that space? And what is investor sentiment about funding new AML drugs? And so you may recognize that AML is still having a big impact on patients, but not really understand the complexity of the world that you're going to have to dive into if you want to go in and displace a standard of care treatment in terms of getting clinicians, investors, regulatory people to support your efforts. And so I would encourage you to think about that if you're contemplating developing a new company or a new therapeutic. Another thing that was a really pleasant surprise for me was the difference in the way teams can be built in biotech compared to academia. In my lab, basically, I build teams out of people who approach me as trainees who want to train in my lab. And I accept them, and we hodgepodge together a group, and each person is kind of focusing on their own project and their own career objectives. They're distracted by teaching, by classes, by job applications. In industry, you're really able to deliberately put together a team that has the right skill set to do what you're trying to do. Let me just give you an example of the most recent company I founded called Corventum, along with these three other co-founders. Jamie Dwyer will be speaking to us a little later this morning. But the point I want to make out is we put together a team where we had someone who really understood the science, someone who was really an expert in regulatory affairs and clinical trials, someone who is one of the world leaders in treating the disease that we're focusing on, and someone who has the business and legal expertise to help us. This has just been an incredible team where we have complementary and overlapping skill set. And that goes throughout the organization. You can really deliberately build a team with the people and the skill sets that you want. And then I think it's also really important to recognize that in academia, often we're focused on growing our reputations, trying to get a prominent paper, trying to get a big grant, worrying about which order in the author list we're going to have. Whereas in biotech, none of that matters, and the focus has to be always on building value. The font on this is a little small, but I think it conveys the point that as you move along from target to hit to lead optimization, et cetera, through phase 1, 2, 3, what happens is the value is building as you go, and then it really explodes toward the end. And the whole while, your chances of success and of reaching that milestone are going down. And so you need to be focused on really trying to drive from one point to the next and build value in your company as you go, recognizing that the whole time there's a clock ticking as your patents are expiring, the business landscape is changing, and so you really have to develop a sense of urgency and push your company forward to the next value inflection. So I'll just wrap up by sharing these few bits of advice if you're contemplating doing a startup. First, don't be afraid to do deep diligence into the area. Ask yourself, of course you're enamored with your technology, but will it really solve a problem that matters? What are the biggest liabilities and risks? And get feedback from as many people as you can, but don't be afraid to be your own toughest critic. And then start to think about building a team deliberately. Don't think about finding your friends or people who have the same expertise as you. Think about building out complementary capabilities into your team. Who are you missing? What kind of expertise? And then when you assemble that team, I think it's really important to make everyone feel like they're an owner. One good way to do that is to make sure that everyone is an owner, and so that everyone is pulling in the same direction, and that a success for the team is a success for everybody. As I mentioned, focus relentlessly on building value and create a sense of urgency in the company. My final thought is just to say that of all the things I've done in academia, I've had some really wonderful experiences. Some of the most satisfying things I've done professionally have come in these companies. And so if you're on the fence about whether you want to start a company and whether it's compatible with an academic career, let me just say you should go for it. It's incredibly rewarding, and it really does help you change your mindset in ways that can be beneficial to your academic career as well. Thank you.